Hey everyone, so are we seeing a shift in the Gulfront condo market? The numbers are in for April for 2022 for Treasure Island and Panama City Beach. I'm Craig Duran with the Duran Group at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. There's some interesting trends that we're watching. I want to go through those with you today. Before I dig into the numbers, I'm getting a lot of feedback about these videos. I do them once a month or so. People are finding them very helpful, beneficial. If you know anyone that may want to watch this stuff or that would benefit from keeping up with their information on Treasure Island or really any of the stuff happening in the Gulfront condo market, either encourage them to subscribe to the YouTube channel or share this with them. We're just getting a lot of feedback as we're seeing some things shifting around in the market. So let's get right to the numbers. A couple of things to consider. Actually, first of all, think about supply and demand for a minute. Very simply, if prices are here and prices we're worried about, or we're wondering if prices will go here, in real estate, that isn't going to happen very quickly. But there are going to be some small incremental trends in some of the data that can sort of signify that we might be at the end of going in this direction and maybe flattening out and then maybe potentially pulling back this way. So there's some important things from a supply and demand standpoint that we're watching. Let me show you that. So this spreadsheet, I've got this highlighted for January. I want to take you from January to April of this year to see what's happened. Don't dig in unless you really like numbers. You can pause this and kind of really look at every column here, but just focus on columns B and D for just a minute. Active, think about that as supply. This is the number of units for sale in the market at any given time, and we're comparing it to the same week of the year before. The number of new contracts, think about that as demand. How many people are wanting to buy something, how many contracts are being written is a good sign of what kind of demand there is in the market. So supply, demand. Look at supply in January. We were down about 50% year over year. Buyers had 50% fewer choices of condos to buy. And they wanted to buy, so they felt pressure. Look, they were buying 36, 9, 16, 17% more condos than they did the year before in the same time period. And the year before, remember, was a very, very good year for condo sales. So even fewer choices and more demand in January. Look at what happens very quickly. Just look at the colors into February. Still down about the same numbers, 50% or so, but we're now down. People are writing fewer contracts in February, 17%, 10%, 17, 24%. Less demand. And now watch the numbers. Supply in March. We were about 50% fewer condos January and February. In March, we go from 40 to 34 to 27 to 11. We're almost even by the end of the month of March when you compare it to the year before. We're adding supply to the market. The number of the demand, look at this now. Instead of just down a little bit, we're down almost 50% in some cases year over year. And then where it's really, really dramatic, look at this. For sale, we now have more units for sale than we did this time last year. 2%, 10%, 23, 25% more supply in the market. For the first 3 months of the year, we had lower supply. We've added supply. We now have 25% more than we did this time last year. And look at these numbers again. We're down. Demand is off 25, 20, 34% down. Supply and demand, it's pretty straightforward. When you look at months of inventory, remember 4 or 5 months of inventory represents a neutral market in real estate. That means that the entire process from putting something up for sale and closing would take about 4 or 5 months. In January, we were at 0.54 months of inventory. Theoretically, the entire Gulfront condo market would sell out in about a half a month. By April, we're almost 5 times as slow as we were in January. We've slowed down to 2.27 months of inventory. 2.27 months of inventory on its face is still a seller's market, is still a hot market. Units are taking 60, 70 days to sell versus 4 or 5 months, which is somewhat normal in real estate. But this feels a lot slower than that when just in January, it was taking 10 and 15 days to sell a condo. So things are slowing. Markets are slowing down. Pricing hasn't been affected really yet. I don't think, one thing to keep in mind about this, frankly, there are not a lot of buyers and real estate agents who dig into the numbers this much. They're just looking at what condos come up for sale, what's sold. They're not looking at trends like this. And so if a buyer finds something that they want to buy, they still feel a pressure to buy something for now. I was just at a real estate conference in Orlando last week. Some really high-powered agents from major markets across the country, San Diego, Orlando, Atlanta, Rhode Island, Philadelphia. I'm missing a few, but you get the idea. Still loads of stories about an intense market, a rapid market, competitive offers, 40 people at open houses. But most of these stories were for people who were trying to find a place to live. Very different than investment second home condo market. It is more of a discretionary purchase. So keep that in mind. We're trending up. We're trending that we're adding supply, and we're coming into beach season where we most of the time have a lot of activity. If we look at Treasure Island specifically, this has been a really interesting market this year. In October, if you remember, if you were watching the market, October, there were 10 months of inventory. There were loads of units to buy. Then there were 8, and by February, it was 0. There was nothing to buy. It was hard to find anything. Back in April now, we've jumped back up to 4 months of inventory. So the Treasure Islands have been really active in the condo market over the last 6 months. Recent sales, we have, I wanted to do March and April for you since I didn't dig specifically into Treasure Island last month. Just for March and April, the sales were here: 620,000, 686,000, and 707,777. Couple strategy things to consider if you were thinking about selling in 2022 in regards to timing. The numbers are showing us, at least right now, that supply is being added to the market, meaning if you're thinking about selling something, you have more competition. You can even look at that last chart. In Treasure Island, you went from in March of having 0 months of inventory to now 4. That means there's more competition. Look, there are 3 new condos that came up for sale in April. One thing to pay attention to here also, look at this red line right in here for just a minute and go from April, May, June, July, August. The red line is for sale, units for sale, supply again. We added a lot of supply last year in those few months, even in a hot market. Think about why. In the summertime, most of these condominiums are occupied or rented. It's very difficult if someone does want to buy something and they want to look at 3 or 4 or 5 things or more. It's very difficult to schedule showing appointments to get in and see anything because they're so occupied. So even though there's good demand in the market, it ends up on paper that there's a little less demand because contracts can't be written. Buyers say, well, I'll just wait until I can come back and I can get into the things I want to get into. We're already adding some supply. We've gone from 0.5 months of inventory to 2.27 months. You wouldn't be surprised to see us add more inventory in the summer because of the same fundamentals as last year. If that's the case, we could very easily drift. Well, let's look at the exact number, in fact. April last year, we were at 0.5, 4 or 5 months of inventory. By August, we were to 1.92 months of inventory. If you think about that in terms of percentages, 4 times slower, about 3 or 4 times slower. If we're at 2.27 months of inventory right now, and we're going to be 3 times slower in August, we are now well into 6-7 months of inventory, very much buyer market territory. A buyer in September, October is much more patient. They're less motivated because beach season is not right around the corner. If you have a patient buyer, less motivated, that now has way more choice, that's going to put a lot of pressure on pricing, a lot of pressure on the fundamentals. If you're selling, your unit should be in excellent condition. Those things will matter. Pricing, appropriate pricing will matter that much more. So if you're thinking about selling, ideally you would start the process sooner rather than later while you have potentially as little competition as you may have all of this year. It's very possible that some of the highest selling prices for condos in 2022 are happening now or may have already happened. It's a pretty bold statement, but it's possible that at least maybe we see a flattening. there could be pressure on pricing later in the year if these trends continue. That's a lot of coulds and ifs, but I'm just looking at what's happened and at least projecting the next couple of months that it wouldn't be surprising to see a little more supply in the market. Well, the big question, I think, and I had this question last year and the year before, is if we do add some supply to the market, how much demand do we see in July, August, September, October, really, for condos to suck some of that supply out of the market? What's happening in the overall economy? What's happening in the condo market? What's happening in the stock market? What's happening? All those things do we still have the demand? Do still people feel good about the market? Do people still have discretionary income? Do they still feel good? That's going to be the question mark. So if you're thinking about selling, I would start a little sooner rather than later this year to avoid some competition. If you want to wait till the end of the season because you're either going to use the unit or you're going to rent it, at least think about starting your process a little earlier. Don't wait until Labor Day and then make the phone call to the real estate office. Think about targeting late June, early July. It takes us some time to shoot photos and videos to do it right. You have to pick a pretty day. The unit has to be vacant and you have to have a pretty day, which is sometimes a challenge in the summertime. It takes a little bit of time to edit that stuff and get it right and build the websites and all those kinds of things. And so even if you had something released by early, middle of July, you can see things are taking a little longer to go under contract, and contracts still are taking 3-4 weeks to close in most cases. You're all of a sudden now you're at the end of rental season anyway. So think about starting the process a little sooner. You'll have a little less competition. That could lead to higher sales prices. So I know that's 12 minutes of a lot. I crammed in a lot this time. We hadn't gone through this specifically for Treasure Island recently, so I wanted to give you guys some information. If you have any questions, please reach out anytime. My cell phone number, if you want to call or text, is 850-527-0221. Again, please share this with anyone you think might find some benefit in this. If you know anyone especially thinking about selling but it says, hey, I'm going to wait, or I'm not too worried about it, here are just some ideas of what might be happening in the market. Thanks again for watching. I'm Craig Duran with the Duran Group at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services.